Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome back. Video Game Adaptations is back with my co-host, Kat Valor.
Hi.
Um, I honestly, it doesn't feel like it's. I guess because we've done content in between, but it's hard to believe that it's already been that long since we did our last episode.
It does. And it is because we talked during the break. And then the break is also longer than we had planned on it being because I got really sick and couldn't do our last planned episode.
That's okay.
And
Yeah.
then
I mean,
so
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it feels like it's been not that long, but we've been gone a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. But we thought it would be clever since we're going into, August being back to school month. We thought it would be clever to cover Detention. Which I think when we originally were putting this list together was one of the ones that we were both kind of like looking forward to as far as I mean, I know we look forward to all of them, but you know what I mean? Like I think this one was one we were excited about.
Yeah.
This one's going to be, we're going to attempt to keep it in our normal time range. But this one is going to be, we are going to talk about the game, the movie, and the Netflix series, all in one episode. I think we can do it.
I think so.
So, all right. So so that's what we're talking about. Detention. Detention, if you're not familiar, is a side scroller game. It's been out for a few years. You have information on those, right? What's our synopsises?
Yes, our synopses. We have for the game first, double checking I'm in the game. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I will say for Detention, these are the closest our synopses have been from like version to version,
Okay.
which makes sense when you look at some of the things we've covered. But
True.
uh,
True. Yeah.
so our game synopsis, this came out in 2017, it says. It actually had, I'm pretty sure, a demo before
It
that
did. It
that
did.
was very illegal. Um, but it was released officially in 2017, and the synopsis is as follows. Set in 1960s Taiwan of the White Terror period, students Wei and Ray find themselves trapped in the vulnerable Greenwood High School, which is located in a remote mountainous area. The place they once knew has changed in unsettling ways, haunted by evil creatures known as the Lingered. While hiding from rampaging monsters, the protagonists unveil mysteries that slowly reveal the dark past of the cursed school.
That works. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think that might be our most accurate synopsis. The Detention people knew what they were doing when they released information.
I mean, yeah, it's not American, so of course
Yeah.
it's done right. Yeah. Okay.
And then are we doing movie or game next?
I think the movie came out before the show, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because the show's new, I think, newer. Anyway, so yeah, we'll do movie first and then show.
Okay. All right. So bear with me. This is the longest of the three.
Okay.
The movie in 1960s Taiwan during the White Terror, high school student Wei Chung Ting is a member of the secret book club headed by Miss Yin Sun Han that reads and studies banned books by the government, the possession of which is heavily penalized. Sometime later, the books club's activities are discovered, and Wei is among those arrested and tortured for information. After hours of interrogation, Wei, barely alive, enters a nightmarish version of the school that is seemingly abandoned, with most of the rooms boarded up, placards of mourning.
Okay.
That one I think is a really good. In their defense for the movie synopsis, I think it's hard to say anything more than that without pretty heavy spoilers.
I
That's a
agree.
good starting point of what's going on.
The game one didn't really give too much away either. I'm really impressed because it's countless times when I'm reading, the short synopsis of a film or anything, I have to stop or reword it because it gives way too much away. So I'm kind of impressed.
Yeah, I think these are they only really scratch the surface of what's going on, but they do a really good job not spoiling anything.
And still being intriguing, right? Because you're kind of like, oh, I don't know. All right, cool. So the show.
And our show,
Mhm.
Based on the game, apparently the movie was not, but based on the game set in the period of martial law known as the White Terror in Taiwan, Detention entwines the suffocating political situations under martial law and heart-stopping legends of local deities portraying a labyrinth of unspeakable oppressions. The series opens at Greenwood High School in 1999. Transfer student Yunjang Lu enters a forbidden area of the school grounds where she encounters the ghost of Reijin Fang. Fang reveals the history of the school over the past 30 years, including how a group of students and teachers were persecuted as they fought for freedom in an era of censorship. So, um,
Yeah,
that one
and
gives more away, but I also think it's more relevant to the plot of the show,
because the
which
show
is the
is
most different
yeah,
of the
which I know
three.
we'll get into because the show it took me like it took me until like episode 5 to finally realize like what was actually happening before it got to like the meat of the stuff we already knew from the game. Like
Yeah.
it took me or from playing the game rather. So it took me and then because I messaged you when I got to that point, and I was like, okay, I see. Like I realize what we're doing now. I got it. But yeah, so I had never watched the show and I thought that I had seen the movie, but then when I watched it, I realized I hadn't. I don't know what other I know I've seen a lot of different, Korean, Japanese, like all kinds of like ones revolved around like schools. So I guess I was thinking of something else, but I had not seen this. So it ended up being two new watches for me.
Yeah, the Asian horror has a lot of school territory to cover, so,
And ghost
um,
school stuff specifically. I feel like, I don't know. Was there like a, I don't know. I know I've seen something that I thought was this, but evidently it wasn't because I didn't remember a single thing from this movie when I watched it.
I, this is one of the ones that I was looking forward to before, The Last of Us came out because we started the
Yeah.
show, like, right before The Last of Us.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
this was my top ranked thing. I think it
Okay.
has been displaced by The Last of Us now.
Sure.
It is still my favorite video game movie, but it ranks really, really highly for me.
Yeah.
Pretty much since
Um,
I have seen it, like but
yeah.
this also I'm biased, I think, because this is also I think out of all of the games that we have lined up to talk about,
Mhm.
I have nostalgia that kind of, like, tilts some of the games, like, some of the franchises especially,
Because you
but
mean because like, yeah, I see what you're saying. But whereas this is a
critically
newer
speaking,
game.
this is my favorite game, though, like, that we have lined up to talk about. I really loved the game. So,
Yeah.
I it's not a huge surprise that I also like the adaptations. I think they did really interesting things with them.
Yeah. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. And I know we talked about this briefly when we talked about The Last of Us specifically, but some of these like shots that are like almost shot for shot, there's a few of those in the movie
Yeah,
that I thought were just like I don't think there's quite the same setup, and the show is its own is really kind of it's a separate like it's the same, but it's got a lot of different things going on versus the movie is very the game, whereas
yeah.
the show is the game and then some other stuff. But I thought that like one of the things that I think is so great, like honestly about the game is how it looks. Like the game as a side scroller, like those can be hit or miss for me as far as keeping me invested in them.
Mhm.
And so, but this is the art, the way that this game looks, the colors that are used, the dark, the light, the shaded areas, in the corners, and the way that just the way that this game was drawn is like stunning.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that that was like one of the things that I loved about it. It like catches your attention immediately from that first classroom scene when, falling asleep or whatever. I thought that was really, really good. And I think that the movie specifically captured those aesthetics really, really, really well.
I think that's something that all 3 versions have, um, is the aesthetics. It's
True. Yeah. The show did too.
the show took a different angle, like,
Yeah.
it's the least similar, but also for the story that they're trying to tell, I think they did a really good job capturing the atmosphere while
Mhm.
still, because it takes place, like 30, 40 years after,
Yeah.
39, whatever.
It's 30 something years, right? 60, 1960s. is what we
Yeah,
get, and it takes place
60s.
in 1990, right?
So, yeah. So it
I
takes place,
remember.
like, a while after and kind of
Mhm.
revisits, and I think they did a really good job capturing, like, that '90s school era, while also still when they're in the abandoned building, you can tell that it's the building from the game. Like, I think they did a really good job paying
Oh, yeah, I
homage to
agree with
that.
that.
Um
Yes.
But the aesthetics are why so this is, when we talk about The Last of Us, that was, like, one of those rare new games that I played, like, when it was out. I'm usually pretty behind the times on, like, bigger titles, because
Mhm.
I play so many, like, indie
Yeah.
short games. This is the kind of game that I play, like, this is one
Yeah.
it was on my radar right away.
Yep.
I loved it, and it's because I do really like the aesthetics of, like, just indie, and especially Asian horror games. They're always so interesting to look at.
Yeah, and then too, like, it's one of those things, I think because this was made as a side scroller specifically, some of those, like, sequences when you're trying to get away and stuff, I think those are almost more effective than when you're in, like, first person or you're in, like, these other style games because you can see
You can
how
see how
close
close, yeah.
you can see how close it is, and you're like, "Oh my god!" Like, there's so much anxiety, and I think, I really liked that, the movie was a little bit more like it in that sense that you got some of the sequences, like the scare sequences, whereas the show, because it is a, I guess, like an extended story because it goes over 8 episodes, it is very much more a drama horror, whereas the movie was more of the horror. But I got to be honest, I don't hate either side of it because I loved both. I thought the movie was so fucking good, and I really enjoyed the show. There was a couple, maybe like 1 or 2 episodes of the show that I felt were a little like a little, they lulled for me because at the time I was trying to figure out like where is this going in
Yeah.
comparison to the game? Like where, like I'm wondering, like, is it even? I think I said this to you. I was like, I don't understand, where, like, how this is supposed to be an adaptation. And then you get to a certain point in the game where all of those pieces from the game and the movie and, the story part starts kind of like coming in, and you're kind of like, okay, all right. I'm on, like, and then that kind of pulled me back in from the slight lull that was in between the setup of the story and then getting to the part that was related to the game.
Which, and I agree because there is kind of that lull there, and it's not
Yeah.
the immediate, like, horror immersion
No,
that you have in either the game or the, movie.
for sure.
I do think it was really clever, though, because they knew they had 8 episodes to do it, and I
Mhm.
think taking that slower approach because you really only get 2 episodes of the show that are about the game
The
at
last
all,
two.
like,
Mhm.
the last but I think
Mhm.
taking those first 6 episodes, they establish a character, they draw these really which we'll talk about, I'm sure, when we get into the show segment, but they draw these
Yeah.
really interesting parallels
Yeah.
between, like, '90s issues and the point of the game, and they, like, get you very immersed in this outside perspective, which is also how you approach the game because you come in with your own preconceptions and biases and
Yep.
stuff, and then you still have to empathize with the protagonist of this game that you don't know. And I think it was really interesting that it's like we spend 6 episodes getting
Mhm.
you into the perspective of this one teenage girl only to see the main story through her eyes, which was just like that really kind of blew my mind the first time I watched it
Yeah,
because
yeah. No, that's
it's a
actually a
weird
really
way.
good point. I didn't really think about it like that. I really, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because so I think the game is a couple hours, right? Like, I think to play the
Yeah.
game, it's like a few hours. It's not some super long extended experience, but it does take its time getting you to the pieces of the story as you're going through and trying to survive and I guess would you call it, I guess it's like survival horror because you can't really like fight. You just have to run away and
Yeah.
keep moving rather. And I think is interesting because to me, like the storyline with the show specifically is an interesting time in seeing how long it took for there to be change that needed to happen because they're talking about a time when the government was the way that it was, and it was set like the setting we get in the 60s, and then seeing that even in almost the year 2000 they still haven't gotten out of it. Like there's
Yeah.
still parts of, like obviously with like because Bai is what's his name in the show? It's something else. Some
Pi. It's right? It's
It's
similar?
BAI in the game in the movie, but I think it's something with a P.
It's yeah, pi.
It's just Pi. Oh,
Pi.
okay, okay.
It's pi.
So
Yeah.
they changed some of that stuff, which is fine. But his character, like, it's how many years later, and like he's still the same as he was in this like before. Like he's just as like nosy, and he's so mean and cruel. And like I'm like watching the way like these characters get treated by their parents, and I don't know, like that particularly was like rough. It's like these kids were like getting it from the government, their parents, their teachers. They're like, every way they went, it was the way, it was just this like really hard. I don't know. It was rough. Like I felt so sad for them because they're going through so much. But I guess we can do. I guess you said. What did you say? You said something. You said like the show segment. We probably should go 1, 2, 3. I didn't really think about that, but that does make
Oh,
sense. Um, yeah, so game.
game.
Um, the game is beautiful. I think the game is super, super beautiful to look at. Um, my experience with it was I'm horrible at playing horror games. I think I've been pretty honest about that. Because as far as I'm concerned, the person on the screen is an extension of myself. And so I get like scared very easily. And so like when we get to some of these scenes where we're running, like moving down the like hallways, right, and the lantern thing is like right on top of you, and those sequences, like it had me so distrusting of the environment as we're trying to get the story. Like I was constantly worried about what was going to happen the next piece after we did this one thing and we go to the next part, like what's going to happen. So I
Yeah.
think it was like pretty effective as far as like being a scary game. I didn't know that the demo was like what you said though. You said the demo was not supposed to be released.
Yeah, they had I because I remember I got really excited, and I probably didn't play it like I it probably wasn't on my radar that early before it came
Mm,
out,
mhm.
but I was hearing about it and stuff, and they had because I you can't really say when we're talking about detention that they have censorship issues in Taiwan, because it has like whole different connotations here. But Red Candle is a Taiwanese company, and they did
Oh.
have like some minor in comparison to the plot of the story, like censorship issues with the demo of the game. So
Oh.
I remember like the Taiwanese government being like, "Yeah, you can't release this. Like, you don't get international release for this." And like I said, it wasn't like because it came out. I think I heard about it in like 2016. Uh,
Yeah.
and that was like it was probably just like a month or so before it got the green light on Steam for the demo, and then
Okay.
um, so it wasn't like a huge thing, but I do remember there was like this brief period when I was trying
Yeah.
to get my hands on the game, like
And it
when
was
I was
like,
like, sign me up for that demo, and the
yeah.
Taiwanese government was like, no,
Oh, that's funny.
no,
Because
actually.
I watched I watch a YouTuber named John Wolf that plays horror games, and he played the demo. And I was thinking when you said that, I was like, man, I wonder if he knows that. But the demo did end up being fine
Yeah, it ended up being
after the
fine.
fact. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, hmm,
It was like a delay, and then we got the
hmm.
demo and everything was great. And I don't think I played the full game, but I think I played it probably pretty close to release. It's been a few years.
It's been a bit. It's
Um,
been a minute for me too. I think probably because I would say honestly the only reason I probably would have even really known about it is because I probably watched John Wolf play the demo. That probably would have been my like introduction to it anyway. Um but what did you think about the gameplay experience? What did you like or not like about it? Or I mean I yeah.
so I was really impressed with this. I'm usually I saw the visuals and immediately shut off like whatever trailer I had stumbled across that told me about it because I like going into stuff blind. So I saw the visuals, I was like, I'm in, shut it off,
Yeah.
tried to get a copy, had to wait. But then I was to find out it was a side scroller because I usually am not. I I always get worried that because I get frustrated before I get scared, and I was like really worried that like if there are going to be really difficult mechanics, I'm gonna be angry and I'm not gonna be immersed and I'm not gonna
Yep.
get scared. And honestly, I don't really think I had either experience. Like it's not a hard game. I don't
No,
know what
not
I
at
was
all.
worried about.
No,
It
no,
was like
not at all.
but I don't play a lot of side scrollers. So I remember being worried and then like I turned the game on and honestly, I don't remember the gameplay much at all. I remember the story. Like this was just it's so narratively driven and that story is so well told
It
that when I
is.
found out they were doing a movie, it was like, oh fuck yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's I would say, and that's something that all 3 have that's like an incredible strength is the way that the story is told because, it there's all kinds of story games, games that tell stories, like survival games that you just have to get to the next part so you can pick up the next piece of story and then you keep it. But there's tons and tons and tons of games like that, and not just in the horror genre, but the way it's kind of it's kind of crazy because I mean, obviously, The Last of Us was one that did this too, but like whenever a game can have me invested in the gameplay at the point that I'm like feeling the things that these characters are feeling or feeling the things that like it just like genuine emotional response to things and stories like it's very I don't that doesn't always happen for me. It's kind of hit or miss with gaming specifically. Like movies and TVs, I'm pretty easy to be invested in characters. It doesn't take much, but for games like to go into that and feeling the things that I felt as the story unfolds and all the things that happens and then how it I was able to like the movie and the show got me to feel those things just as strongly. And I would
Yeah.
have thought it would have been that the game and the movie and the show would have been able to make me feel those things quicker, better, easier, more extreme, whatever. But it was pretty much the same across the board because the game it tells the story in such a way that you can't help but care. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how anyone could play the game and get invested in the story and pick up the pieces of the puzzle as you go and not just be like, ow. Like it's rough. And it
It's a rough
also,
one.
I will tell you this, the ending or at least the big reveal of like all the things that have happened and how they happened and what was the real reason it happened, like I was not actually prepared for that. Like I didn't necessarily pick up on that. It was literally a buildup of moments and then you're just like, oh no, like that was how
Yeah.
I felt. Like I don't know, that was rough, but that was how when I got to the big reveal of the storyline, it was just kind of like like I don't know, it sucked to get to that part because like I don't know, it just made me feel a lot of things.
I so that one got me a little bit less. I think it's because I was playing a lot more like Asian horror at the time and that is kind of not that I've played many Taiwanese games because usually I play like Japanese horror
Mhm.
games. But that is kind of a thing that I was going in where it's like they're gonna try and catch me and I'm gonna be prepared. Like
Okay.
um because I had just played not Mad Father, whatever the other one is by that company where like you're the bad guy. And I was like,
Oh, I don't know
I'm
that one.
I'm prepared to die. So there was a part of me that kind of thought it was going to be worse than it was,
Okay.
honestly, because I was just like, I went in and it's like, you know, they have you're trying to like put pieces together about what happened, and it's like, I somehow caused this. like,
Oh, I know. I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I gotcha. Yeah,
like
yeah.
they're not gonna get me again. I know. Which it's something that I like though. It's why I like playing those games because I think even though we're starting to catch on now, like in the early to mid 2010s, there
Mhm.
were still not a lot of like American horror games where you play as someone very complex that isn't like obviously a hero,
You're right.
you know?
Yeah. No, you're
And
right. Yeah.
like that's something that I really appreciated. It's one of the reasons why I liked Detention so much because it's like you feel for your character, you empathize with her, you understand all of her actions or all of their actions
It's too yeah,
because
too
it's
too
2.
involved. Yeah.
But, like, you understand the story and what's going on, and, but you still feel like, but it's still not good things, you know? They're still not decisions that you necessarily would make because they're rough. It's a rough time.
Yeah, no, it is. And there's a couple of changes in the setup for this between, the movie and the show, but I think that the movie specifically, there was like this weird moment because like I knew the basics of the story and I remembered the ending pretty clear. There was some stuff I didn't quite remember because it's been a long time. But going into the movie though, I because by the time I watched the movie, I was only halfway through the show, so I didn't get to the part in the show that was more like the game or the storyline of the game. But the movie in particular, had me wondering like if they were going to change the her piece because
Yeah.
there's like these moments where she's like no 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 like not me, and I'm kind of like where's this going to go, like is it going to actually go in a different direction, is it going to have like a different reveal, and they kind of did this really good job of like making me question where they were going to go with it instead of just assuming that it was going to be the same.
Yeah.
um and it was I don't know, like the movie, I don't know. I guess I like when I went into the movie, first of all, I love Asian horror in general. Honestly, foreign horror in general is just it's way better than stuff we have here for the most part. And I feel like I went into it expecting to really enjoy it either way. I did not expect it to be as like I don't know. I don't even know what the word is. It hit me though. Like I was like so into it and so invested. It was like I couldn't lay down to watch it. You know what I mean? Like I had to like sit up and I had to like be able to move and react as things are like happening on the screen. And there's like, I when we get them together for the the beginning where they're in the school together and they're interacting for like the first couple minutes or whatever that they're of their first interactions, and they're like I'm wanting to be like, oh, like it's gonna be so I don't know, like they did such a good job of making me think outside of what I knew was going to happen in the game. And but the thing that I loved about it was I felt like the movie was similarly paced to the game as far as
Yeah.
getting information because it takes its time. You have the moments where they meet I forget the guy's name, the guy that has the keys, whatever his name is. They get him and then they see one of the other students, and then she's seeing these other things. Like they just did such a good job of not rushing through the experience and really just like had me looking constantly everywhere to see what I was going to see. And I really love that too.
The pacing was really good, and I don't think it's just about the way that they doled out the exposition. I think it's because it was such a non and this is something we could not get away with in American movies, where it's so non-linear, but it's like your brain kind of it's fragmented so much, but your brain puts them in order, like, as you're watching without a bunch of
Yeah.
expositions where it's like, "Hey, now we're going back to this time," or, like, a big sign that says, "This is a flashback." Like, it's
3
it's very
years
smooth
earlier.
to
Yeah.
watch, but also very fragmented, and
Yeah,
I think that's the perfect style for the story.
it
I think they
worked.
did a really great job with it visually. It's not confusing. Like, I think that's the thing. If you pitched this to if we got an American remake of this, someone would pitch this exact movie, and the American directors would be like, "No one will ever understand that if you put it in that order." Like, I just we don't trust our audiences enough over here to
You're not, yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know what it is. Like it's just a skill, like an art form, because you're right. It's so broken up, but it made sense from beginning to end. And I
Yeah,
think I will think I do think one of this is just thinking from like a visual side of it. I do think one of the things that helps is when we're in the past, the before stuff, the colors change. So while
yeah.
it's still a gloomy story, the coloration of what we're seeing is changed because even though the parts when they're at the school, and they're kind of putting everything together, that's not black and white, but
It is
it's
desaturated.
desaturated. Whereas when you go into the before, it's the color is completely different. And I think when you change the way something looks visually, you're setting it apart from the other things. And I feel like that probably played a lot to do with like being able to say, oh, okay, I know where we are. Seamless. Like there was no frustration or confusion. Like, what are we doing? Why are we? I have seen American movies that I'm like, what's happening? Or they do it too much, or but to your point, this story is told so delicately through those like fractured pieces, and it just, I don't know, it just worked.
It really works. And yeah, that is one thing that I have seen in American movies too, where we go the full black and white. And sometimes it works, but 9 times out of 10, it irritates me. It's like I've got it. Where it's a memory. You don't have to. Or they have like in Blood Rain where they had that like motion blur lens on,
Oh, where
where
it's
they're
like,
like,
we
look,
just
it's a
want you to,
flashback.
yes.
Right.
There are
Okay.
more clever ways to accomplish that without, yes, without treating your viewers like they're idiots. I agree.
And this one, like, it
Yeah.
had the same, everything was still the same color. It was just like that subtle, we're
Just
going
in
to tone it
just enough.
down
Yeah.
for, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the visuals, like, they're all, I'm pretty sure they're all creatures that were in the game, but they did a really great job bringing them to the screen,
Yeah.
and giving them more screen time. Uh, and it's such a simple thing, but like, because they did have a lot of, like, the lingering had their own designs. There's the
Mhm.
mirror faced amalgamation creature at the
Yep.
end that was just stunning. But even the simple stuff like the bags over the heads of the ghosts, just elegant, eerie, really simple thing, but it
Simple.
it
Yeah.
stood out so much. Like, that was so unsettling, especially at the
Yeah.
end where she's walking down the
I was
aisle,
just
through
about
them.
I was just about to say that. And then there's this scene, I think this is in the movie. I don't think I'm mixing them up, but I might be. I think it's in the movie where you see them all with the bags and they're clapping like in synchronicity in a way that's almost robotic.
Yeah,
And you're just like, mm-mm. I don't like that shit at all. Yeah.
and that is, that's also something that I liked about the movie. There aren't a lot of, points where it's like, even though I liked the movie better, and I feel comfortable saying the movie was better than the show,
Agreed. Yeah.
I there weren't a lot of, like, point by points where it was like, "I think the movie does this better," because I think they just did things differently for the most
Agreed.
part.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say that the movie did better, um, is that, and it's because, and again, it's hard to say because the, show approached it so differently, but, like,
Mm.
the clapping, the synchronicity, when they're marching in, when they're singing the song, like, you have that full, like, robotic brainwashing, white terror feeling that even in the flashback episodes of the show, those last 2, we didn't quite get enough of that, you know?
Mhm.
We I think they did a really good job, like, in the present timeline of the show in the '90s, where they
Yeah.
have, like, you still kind of have that feel. It's toned down. They're not marching in synchronicity, but, like, as they're filing in, there's that kind
Yeah.
of, like, they touch on it a little bit, which I think overall for the main timeline is the correct approach, but I would
Yeah.
have liked to see a little bit more of that movie influence in the flashback episodes,
Yeah.
like, because that's just such a strict control that the government has on the school, and that's such an overarching presence in the
Mhm.
in the movie that,
Yeah, and I think to your point, it seems like such a simple thing, the marching specifically, but it was unsettling. Like from the first time that it happened, you like at least me as a viewer, I was bothered. I was like, I don't like that. Like it was too much. And I think it's not that you, I mean, we know that what happened, well, we'll stay with the game or the storyline for these three that we're talking about specifically, but we know that what happens is horrible and it's really bad, and we know that there's always the possibility of one little thing costing somebody their life, like we know that. But there's something about presenting it that way, and that keeping that whole like running it like a military versus like, because there's always that push and pull of like, oh, like specifically more so in the show, but it's like, well, they're not soldiers, they're students, they're supposed to be students, blah 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 blah, right? They're kids, you're not treating them like they're kids. And watching those military-esque things like the marching and this stuff, like what you're talking about with the singing and stuff, all of that just like is so just it really, really drives home the tone for what is to come, I think.
Yeah. It also, it gave me this is not a surprise because it takes, like, virtually nothing to get me thinking about this movie, but it did remind me of The Wall, uh,
Oh, okay.
like,
Yeah.
right before they go into the meat grinder, and I'm always like, "Oh,
Yeah.
no." Marching in schools freaks me out.
Yeah. No, I can see that. That makes sense. Um, yeah, I the movie, and I will say, the movie also just did such a good job of like, I think of the 3, I think the only time that I genuinely felt like, I don't wanna say sorry for, but like actually felt like really bad for her was in the movie. When it puts her in the position of all the things that she created. And
Yeah,
it's just like there's something very different about putting this character that we don't know at first. I mean, we know from the game, but from the movie, we don't know at first that she's to blame
yeah.
for a very big portion of it. But when you put the gun in her hand and the razor blade in her hand, and these things are happening, like there's just something very different about the way that that's communicated when doing it that way that was super effective.
Yeah, some of those shots, you mentioned the gun, that's like a very when it first goes into her hand, that shot is phenomenal. The one that really
Agreed.
got me was when she pulls the book out of his
Out of
neck,
his
and
throat.
it's just it feels so visceral,
It
there's a
is.
difference between being responsible for something and being the one to do it. But it doesn't feel that different from a place of guilt, and the movie does really capture, her coming to terms with the consequences, which is rough. It's really, uh, ugh.
Yeah. Because I mean, yeah, because I mean, essentially what happened, I mean, it's it's hard because like, when we get to the show, the student teacher thing is very different than the student teacher thing from the past. The one from the past, while still like in the back of my mind, I'm like, nope, it's wrong. You're just kind of like, like, like there are moments where you're like, oh.
That is, I think, the most impressive moment of the movie specifically, is because it made me root for a romance that just, like, in the game, in the synopsis, in the show, 2 times over, it's like red flags pinging, and in the movie, I was like, "Oh," like, "but I kinda want it to work." And then it was like, "No,
And you're
what's
like,
wrong with me?" But, like, I think because it does present the romance, first of all, as less creepy than the show,
so much less well, that's
like,
and I
it's
think
very
some of that
innocent.
is
They
because
don't
the other relationship we get at the beginning already has tainted like
Yeah.
your thoughts of the other one. But sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, I just, like, it's because it does feel very innocent because he refuses to acknowledge that there's a relationship because he doesn't kiss her, because, like, lines aren't as crossed. Even at the end where he called, the "my narcissus"
Yeah.
will meet each other in a different life. Part of me was like, "That's okay. I can root for this," he didn't do anything creepy. He wasn't a creep. Like, and
No.
because we see it from her point of view, and that's the thing, because I think I I don't know. I feel like I definitely had crushes in school on
Sure.
like people that were too old for me, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like I think there's a certain level of like hoping for it where we can preserve that innocence because nothing creepy or explicit happens,
Happen.
like, in the movie, and they
Yeah.
were really good at walking that line, which the game also, I think, for the most part, was really good at walking,
I
where
agree.
it's like, she's in love with him, she's doing these things for love, you don't have to root for the relationship, but you do kind of have to see why she roots for it, and
Given everything else that's happening around her for sure, because well, and that's the other, what I think it also did was it really felt like an organic situation. It didn't feel like teacher and student sometimes. Like sometimes it just felt like an organic meeting of two people. But I think in the movie specifically, it didn't help that he looked the same age. Like I struggled with that because he looked so damn young. And so I'm
Yeah.
so I watched the movie last night and I made my partner watch it. We do virtual dates, so we're watching it, and we're video chatting like while we're watching it. I wasn't talking much because I was so into this movie, but there was like a part where like when the big reveal happens, and she's like, "Oh no, like I did this or whatever." I was like, "See," I was like, "This is why you don't date your students." My partner goes, "Among other reasons," and I was like, "Yeah, semantics." But I got so consumed in some of those moments with them in the movie because they were so cute. Like they were so like you said, like they were innocent. They didn't feel tainted with him being an adult and using his teachering over like it just
No.
felt healthy, like I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which the fact that they were able to pull off that dynamic so well
they
in a
did a great job.
movie, I if you had told me sitting down, then you're going to kind of be rooting for this, I'd be
Yeah,
like, "Never. Gross." Like, but they pull it off really well, and it is because he's so sweet in this one too,
and
like,
he's
in the movie.
yeah,
He's just a
he's
good
got
person.
layers. He's not
Yeah.
just the crush or the whatever. Like he's the voice of freedom for these kids that are trapped in a world that doesn't want them to be free. Like that whole thing at the end where he's like, oh, he says the quote about about it being freedom when they're listening to the radio thing. And he
Yeah.
talks about that. He's like, oh, oh wait, is that the show? That's the show.
That's
Sorry,
the
I
show
keep
it
getting
is, I think
confused. I
so.
watched them so close together. But in the show, like that was one of the things they talk about with that teacher specifically. But they did a good job in the movie of just making him this like protector too, because he and the other teacher are constantly talking about like not getting the other kids involved and like trying to take up for them and make sure that they're okay. And like, I don't know, they did such a good job of making him be a good person that you weren't worried about her safety with him as a love interest.
Which was I which was good, and then you also it also helps villainize, the not villainize, but you know what I mean, like, put her in an antagonist role of the other teacher because she's like, she's lecturing him, and even though we know where she's coming from because we live out here in the common world with sense,
Yes.
there
Yeah.
is still like seeing it through Fang's eyes as she's watching this,
Mhm.
and this other woman is getting involved unnecessarily and being like, boundaries and you two have to, and she gives him an ultimatum, which I think like in the show it's kind of a warning where it's like you two are getting too close. But in the movie it's like you will stop seeing her or else, and that's kind of like a big it, it helps turn you against her to the extent that Fang is turned against her, where it's like
Yeah.
because like again, if you were just telling the story, if you're just telling the plot points to someone outside of this and you're like, here's a teacher who steps up, you're like, good for her.
Yeah. But in the moment, you're like, go tell on him. Like,
Do it.
yeah, I know. Yeah, and I think like when it came to okay, one of the things that the show changed that I thought was really interesting, and as far as like her being like responsible for all these things, is in the movie, her mother I might be mixing it up. Her mother calls the puts her dad up as like a spy or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the show, it was her. It wasn't the
Um,
mother.
yeah.
And I thought that was interesting because it's like a different take on the spiral leading up to everything else. Because, the beginning of the show, it starts with her suicide. We see, the people being taken down the halls, and then she jumps off, she jumps off the school building, and then we go into present, or well, present day, the later time, and kind of jump into that storyline. And then there's a few things, that happen. And but before it gets to, like, it takes a long time, as we've said, to get to the game portion of the storyline for the show. But the parallels between the two are very interesting indeed, because they've got the parent differences, the stuff with the school, the teacher love interest, even though that's very different as well. And I really, really think that that was one of my favorite things about the show overall, was the connection of these two girls. Because when I messaged you and said the show had me like in tears, it
Yeah.
was their last time together as the two girls that
Yeah.
really just like got, like, I don't know, like, it just affected me emotionally. I thought that was like really, really well done, as far as kind of bringing everything full circle.
Um, the so the show is weird. That was a really emotional moment, was the connection that those 2 end up having
Yeah,
despite all odds, like, despite how they've gotten there. That
yeah.
one really got me. The thing that really breaks me about the show, and they were really clever about how they approach this, because they don't hit the nail too hard on the head, and
Mhm.
that has left me. It's been a little while. The show was the one I didn't have time to rewatch. It hasn't been that long since I saw it
It's
for the
newer.
first
Yeah, it's
time,
newer.
but it
Yeah.
was the one that I didn't have time to rewatch before we recorded today, and the one thing that has really stuck with me since I've seen it is how mean, like, how just, like, the writer's room, we're just like, "We're gonna really torture this girl." To have her have to have this experience, and live through this story, in the ghost's timeline after what she's been through with her teacher
Her
is
own.
just, like, one
Yeah.
of the most upsetting parallels, and honestly, it's not like a moment in the show, it's just the situation that, like,
Yeah.
sometimes I get teared up just, like, thinking about it, where it's
It's
like,
rough,
I
yeah.
can't I
And the
can't
only way it
imagine.
works is because she doesn't remember. That's the
Yeah,
only reason it works, because if she was sent back to that time as herself in another body with a consciousness of like, "Oh shit, I'm not supposed to be here," that would have never happened.
never. Never, 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 and to just and the fact that she doesn't remember, and then, like, she has these little moments where she's conscious that she doesn't remember, but then she just slips back into this relationship with the teacher, and you feel so bad for her, like, living that out where, uh and it works, like, as a narrative, it works as
Yeah,
a making the teacher way creepier in this version than he was in the other 2 versions, like, just by context, because
I
it's not even
know.
really anything he does,
You're
but you're
you're
just so
waiting on something
horrified
nefarious.
at
Yeah.
who's doing it that you're like,
Well, and to your point, like, the other thing is too, is because there were already so many changes as far as, them coming up with this whole other half of the story and whatever. I went into the new situation because by that point we didn't know very much about the other teacher or how they were going to portray that relationship, because they could have easily have changed it, And there
yeah,
were some times when she was seeing, back before the switcheroo, when she's still just the ghost. There's times where she sees the other girl and the teacher together, and she just always has this like awful look of just something on her face. And so I was like, oh, like, she knows he's a piece of shit. Like, that's what I'm thinking in my head. But then when we did the switch, I was like, oh no, is it because he is also a piece of shit? Like, I was so worried that they were going to make them even more similar in that regard, because when she's being assaulted by the teacher, she says, "Save me," and the other girl shows up and makes the lights flicker, and is able to distract him and make him go away so she can leave. And it just made me wonder, like, was it because she also went through something like that? I didn't know where that was going to go, so I immediately went into it thinking he's creepy automatically.
and this shows how little faith I have, I guess, in adaptations. I was so scared that was going to go in a much darker path. Like, even, and it was something that I had been worried about early in, just from the way that she was watching the situations with the teacher. I
Mhm.
really thought that the ghost was going to be jealous, of that whole situation, I thought that was the angle that we
I
were
see.
going to, where
I
the
can see
ghost was
that.
going to be like, resentful of her because she got the attention of her teacher, which, our ghost couldn't ever have,
Mhm.
and I really thought that was going to go in a dark way. And she said, "Save me." And I was so sure that she was not going to get saved. I was like, "Oh no, the ghost is going to be jealous. We're going to have ghost wrath and it's going to get uncomfortable and I'm going to be mad." And I was so relieved by the way that that went, and then emotionally destroyed the next, like 3 episodes, because it got heavy, but not as like I thought it was
Yeah.
going to be way worse than it was.
Yeah.
Um, I
I
don't know what that says about
honestly
me. That
no, I mean, I didn't think in quite the same way. I actually was more wondering, like, she helps originally. Oh my God, speaking of, oh, the scene, oh God, the scene that got me the most in the show that made me so like, "Yeah," is the scene with the legs
mm, yeah,
where I'm like, and then, like, by the 3rd episode, when we were still seeing it, I was like, "Why do they keep showing this?" I know what happened. I haven't forgotten. Like, stop it.
they
But
really wanted to remind you.
yeah, she's like, so she does that to the teacher, um, and which, fine. I didn't like her anyway, but she does that to the teacher. And so, what my thought was when that scene happened, when the assault happened, I thought it was going to go too far, or keep going rather, I guess. And then the ghost was going to just kill him. But then he ended up having like a fucking second arc after that. And I was like,
Yeah,
why? Why? Why is this happening?
we're not done with him yet.
Yeah.
I think why it happens, and what I think was really well done in the show.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of these things I've said have kind of come across as complaints because I didn't know what was going on and I didn't really trust the show until after I was done watching it.
That's
Um, but now having seen the full show and having that retroactive trust in place, one thing that I think they did that was really clever was
yeah.
because the original story, the game, subsequently the movie, which this says that it was adapted from the game. I feel like it took more inspiration visually
From
from
the
the movie,
movie. Yeah.
specifically, but
Yep.
one thing that I think it did really, really well is it took this really small, condensed, short little horror story, about a different time and place and like a different set of characters, and it drew modern parallels that are so relevant to today. And I think having the romance be kind of a saving grace for the student in this like 60s timeline, and then having that juxtaposed to no one believing the student about being assaulted in the 90s timeline. It hurt to watch, but I think it was really clever the way that they approached it. Um, and
Yeah.
I really like, even though again, I didn't trust them to do it this way,
Mhm.
but I really liked that that Fang understood, like coming into the 90s, she had that vengeful attitude going in. She understood that there was a difference. And I think that really helped those last couple episodes, um,
Yeah.
where you are kind of back to rooting for her again, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, like, the thing that happens with both girls, as obviously with our main character, and then when we learn more about Fang later on, but like when is like everything sucks for so long, like
Yeah.
so long, and then I think that's part of why that scene with them at the end of it, and then when she gets to she like dissolves or whatever, and then what's the other girl's name? Not Fang, but the other one
The other one.
from the 90s.
Yeah, I should know that.
La
I don't. Let me
Something
pull
with
it
an
up real
L.
fast. Oh, it would help if I were on the show and not, or not the movie.
It's okay. Um, I'm just drawing a blank. I feel like I've read the subtitles. I should know what it is,
Yeah,
but,
we should know.
um, something with an L, I think.
I think you're right. It's hold on.
You're fine.
It's Ling. Oh wait, no, no, that's not her.
There's a lot of characters. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you'd have to go to find it.
uh, Lu Yun Sang, I think, is how we're gonna say that.
Lou is the first. Is the short is the first.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I don't even know what was I even gonna say. I forgot now. Oh, so one of the things that I really when she goes back to life and she gets to be friends with the guy that I hope she ends up marrying. And she gets there's like that scene where they're sitting down and they're bickering. They're like, they've got like banter going on. But she's sitting at a table with like a couple other people and they're writing, they're getting ready, they're doing test prep or something like that. And she like looks around at this like realization. It's almost like she really genuinely took so much from this experience of like the way her life seemed versus how it got versus what it actually was and could be. And it was that's another I would say really big strength of the show is the ability to create that wide arc over things and have them go together so cohesively. Because I tell you, the other thing that really got to me is when Fang is like telling her like, dude, your mom loves you, stop being a
Yeah.
brat. And it was interesting because we do see it through her perspective for so much of the movie, I mean the show, that I almost didn't pick up on. I mean, I knew she loved her, but she just seemed really toxic and unhealthy. But when we go back and we're seeing these scenes play out when Fang is saying like she loves you, like you got to look at these moments as what they are. And then we get the scene where she's back with her younger self. All of that was just so well done. And then she goes out and she gives her dad the what for. And I'm just like, I loved all of that so much because it didn't leave me feeling like the character we just spent 8 episodes being invested in was going back to a shitty situation. It made me feel like she really overcame and recognized a lot and
Yeah.
is going to have a better life now. Like, the scene with her mom when she hugs her and she's like, I've got this, and she hugs her or whatever. You're just like, oh, I'm so happy for them. Like, they did a
We
really good
believe
job.
she's got it.
Yeah,
Like, we've seen that change in her. Yeah, that was something the show's it's my least favorite of the 3, but it's good.
it
It's,
is good.
like, it's
It is
really,
good.
really good.
Yeah. I think, and it's funny, I don't have any complaints about really any of them. Even the show, I think the only thing I could have said, I've already said, which was there's just a little bit of a lull in certain things. But I think that it being more drama oriented, more character building, less of the horror, that kind of stuff makes sense for the story, like you said earlier, that they're trying to tell. And they've
Yeah,
extended it to 8 episodes. Whereas if this had been a mini series, it would have been a very different experience. And it may not have captured all of the same emotions that slower burn was able to pull from me as a viewer.
yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, even though it was my least favorite as well, I'm telling you, I will rewatch the movie. I absolutely loved it. And I enjoyed the game too. But I think that, even though the show is definitely my least favorite, I really, really liked it. I thought it was really good. It's definitely something I would tell other people to watch. Because I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it's one that I recommend, and it's weird because it's like because we do have the movie, I feel like this wouldn't rank quite as it's not the one that I think of when I think of video game
Yeah,
adaptations because I always think of the movie
sure.
first.
And I
Even
would
when we
too.
were
I will
talking
too.
about doing a detention episode, I thought of the movie first, and then like a couple days later, I was like, "There's also a show about
Yeah. I do remember the show came up after the fact. Yeah.
it was an
Yeah.
afterthought, but it's not because I think if we took the movie out of the equation and, like, I had to rank all video game adaptations, if that's something we do at the end of the series, like, the show would be high up there.
I
They did a
agree.
really good job.
Yeah,
Um,
and it had some changes and it went a different direction, but it's still stuck to the source material. I
it
mean,
did.
as far as, like the take on how it was presented, obviously the movie is closer as far as that, like what we're looking at originally. But yeah, I mean, I think that the way that the show went about it to make itself different from the movie, I think they did really good with what they were trying to do. I mean, I just really liked it. I liked both of them a lot. And I'm surprised that I had never watched the show before now, but I thought I'd watch the movie. Otherwise, I probably would have already watched that too. But no, I really liked these. So
I remember with the show, just because you
uh-huh.
said you weren't sure that it was based off of the game, I remember I had recently found because the movie had not been on Shudder for, like, a full year, right, when I
Mm,
saw the show for the first time, and
yeah.
I was like I saw the so it was still pretty fresh in my mind, and I was, like, scrolling through Netflix, and I saw Detention, and I was like, "Oh, that's kinda funny," and then I read the description, and I was like, "Is that also based off of the game?" And I watched the first episode, and I was like, there's no way that it is. And then it has that sign at the end that's like based off of the game. And I was like, is it?
Yeah.
But it's
Loosely based. Inspired, I think is the
inspired.
term you're supposed to use when it's loose, but it
Yeah.
does get there. But like you said, it's just the last 2 episodes. It's episode 7 and 8 that are the game. The
Yeah.
rest is the new stuff, which again, I didn't hate. I think it makes sense for trying to do something different because there was already a movie. There was no need to redo the exact same thing. We've seen it already and it was done beautifully. So it would have been, I think, silly to sort of rehash in the same way. So I applaud the ingenuity of making the show so different.
And I would throw this out there as like it's hard because we have The Last of Us, which also does its what it's doing very well. But
Yes.
for the most part, I would use Detention as like the gold standard of video game adaptations, where it's like, hey, you take the short narrative focused game, those are the ones you want to look for. You want to keep that narrative and expand on the visuals. And then even like with the show, where it's like, if you want to take it in a different direction, approach the same story from a new angle. Don't just toss it all out. Don't go to a rave on an island in the
I
middle of
was
the woods.
and
Like,
just throw up signs from the video game for no reason whatsoever.
yeah, just like we want adaptations because the stories are already good, you know.
Yeah,
It's
don't change that. We
you
just
don't
want to
have to
see it
change
brought
them.
to where we don't have to focus and get pissed off if we die or lose.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. Yeah. No, I really liked these a lot. How do you feel about these as standalones apart from each other and without the game? Do you think there's enough there that people like it has its own, thing?
So I do think so. One thing that I was hoping to get done this week that I couldn't arrange because my partner has not played the game. He spooks easy. So he's not a big fan when I recommend games to him because he knows that I only play the spooky ones. Um, so knowing that he wasn't going to play it, one of my plans was to try and get him to sit down and watch the movie
Mhm.
this week to see how he liked it, and then just like not tell him that it was a video game
I
adaptation.
see. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll do it anyway and I'll update. Because I said we didn't get it in time for the detention episode, but
Mhm.
I have a feeling this would be like a really fantastic standalone movie.
Well, and to
Like,
your point, like my partner hasn't played the video game, didn't know it was a video game, and she absolutely enjoyed it. Like she really
yeah.
liked it and
Oh,
thought that it
fantastic.
was like she was just as invested in the characters and the stuff as I was. And I think we even talked about like how pretty it looked and things. So I think as she was someone who, had never didn't know anything about the game, came out completely blind, had not seen anything related to the show or anything, just the movie as on its own. She really liked it and didn't feel like, she was missing anything. So,
That's good. That's good to hear. I'm not surprised because it's so hard to get rid of context when you have it, you know. But it's like
sure.
I feel like this would be fantastic, even if it were the first thing that you saw of the
Yeah.
world, you know. Because the
Yeah.
show may be a little bit less so.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Not because
Yeah.
I think it would still be a really good story, but I think if you just watch the show without context of either the
Mhm.
game or the movie, I think you could do
Mhm.
either one. But
Mhm.
I feel like it just doesn't hit the censorship story as hard,
I agree.
um, without the additional context of having already seen
Yeah.
the
Well, and
out.
I think it would be a different brain switch for a viewer that has not played the game or seen the movie to go from this secondary story into the main because of the way it's structured. Like it's almost structured based on thinking people already know the story.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise you end up going, huh? Like, who is this other? What the fuck? Like, because it is just the last 2 episodes specifically.
Yeah.
It's not interwoven the entire time. It's very random things, and then you get the story, kind of at the ass end of it. So I think that I agree with you. I think the movie would be absolutely fine by itself. I think the show, I think people would leave it feeling a little question marky, like um just feeling maybe like there were some things that didn't make sense or didn't add up. I think it would be like you're missing something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Good storytelling,
yeah,
all
great.
the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. And if you've made it through this entire episode where we've told you everything, you should still go watch them if you haven't watched them. Um yeah. So I guess, did you have any other thoughts? That's probably all I had on Detention.
Yeah, I think that's all I had on Detention. I'm glad we talked about this one. I'm glad it made the roster.
Yeah, for sure.
This ranks like super, super high on my list of video game
Well,
stuff.
shit, me too, now that I've officially seen the movie and the show. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's all we have for this episode of Video Game Adaptations. Next month, Kat and I will be back talking Castlevania.
Castlevania.
Yeah, which was one of the ones I was the most excited about because I love Castlevania. So, if you've not seen our other episodes from before our break, there is a playlist. We have covered a few things. What all have we covered? We did Last of Us,
Doom, House of the
Doom,
Dead,
House of the Dead, Blood
Blood
Rain.
Rain.
Yeah. And so, so next month we'll be, and then now, Detention. And then next month we'll be doing Castlevania in September. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on Video Game Adaptations. Hope you have a good rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend. And Kat and I will see you in September.
Bye.